This session is Innovating Together for a Sustainable Green Future. And I'm joined by an absolutely stellar lineup, as you can see on your screen this morning. If you're a keen social media person, please do use the hashtag AllianceConf2021. I put it in the chat, so you can copy and paste that if you need to. And all social posts using this hashtag will appear on the conference social wall on the platform. May I encourage everyone listening to the speakers to write the questions in the questions tab. And of course, any comments that you've got, please put them in the comments box. I believe, excuse me, in the questions box that you can upvote questions. So if there's a particular question that you think is a really good one, rather than writing it out again, you can vote it up, and then we can ask the most popular questions. And I'd love for it to be a really interactive session. So please do pop your questions in there. I have to apologise for my very, very croaky voice. I have a little 2-year-old who seems to have been sick since forever. And I've now seemed to have adopted his cough and cold. So if I have to cough, then my apologies. So obviously our session this morning, Innovating Together for a Sustainable Green Future. We all know, I think, that there is a pivotal role for innovation to play in economic development, and particularly when we look at innovation capacities and how we can build up innovation capacities and how that might play a central role in kind of growth dynamics, I think, of countries. When we think about inclusive innovations as well, we must also think about the transfer of technologies and how this can contribute to development challenges, maybe around water, something that I'm very passionate about and spent a lot of time studying and working in, maybe looking at neglected diseases or reducing hunger, also looking at climate mitigation strategies and building resilience. So innovation and technologies can play roles in all of these areas, I think. And our panel members, I think, will be talking to us about a whole variety of things, not least about energy as well. That's Ainslie's specific area of expertise. So our panel members this morning, I'm joined by Dr. Matt Kennedy, who's joining us from Dublin, I think. And Matt is the Associate Director with the Global Engineering and Professional Services firm Arup, where he heads up the Carbon and Climate Change team. He's the advisory board member for the UN Environment Programme Climate and Technology Centre and Network. Wow, that's a lot of words, Matt. And he's been very involved in COP26 as well. This morning, we've also got Ainslie Chinembiri, who's joining us today from just outside of Edinburgh. Give us a wave, Ainslie. Ainslie was born and brought up in Zimbabwe and now heads up Chitendai Limited, a Scottish solar panel technology company. He's got a background in banking and finance, studied in the UK and has worked for one of Scotland's largest banks. So he's got some very interesting experience, I think. So if you've got some kind of questions around, well, I'm sure you can just probe him, whatever. He won't mind. Next up, give us a wave, please, Maggie and Ngwira. Hi, Maggie. Maggie's joining us from Malawi, where she is the Climate Challenge Programme Malawi Coordinator for Trocaire. I've definitely pronounced that incorrectly. My apologies, Maggie. An Irish charity that provides emergency support during natural disaster. They tackle hunger and violence against women and work in environmentally friendly farming spaces as well. And Maggie is the development and educational practitioner in this space. And finally, we are joined by Dorcas Amoh-Mensah from Ghana. And Dorcas is the advisory lead for Challenges Ghana, and she provides the strategic direction for the unit. So she's involved in kind of business development, looks at lots of different technologies. I think the Challenges team in Ghana work on a whole variety of things, from kind of coffee and youth employment. So very, very wide ranging. It'd be really interesting to hear her work there. So let's, without further ado, pass over to Matt. Where I think, Matt, you've got some slides. So we've got a little presentation from Matt, and then please, if you've got some questions, just pop them in the box. So Matt, if you want to share your slides, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and hopefully you hear me and can see the slides okay.
Yeah, all good, Matt. Thank you.
That's great. So firstly, it's my pleasure to be presenting today at the Alliance meeting. The focus of my few slides is on the role of innovation in climate action. And just a little bit of background to myself and why I'm here. Really, I've been involved in international development, be it from a decarbonisation or resilience perspective, for around 20 years. I was the EU negotiator at the climate meeting in Paris, and that my main focus was technology transfer. And ultimately, it's my background is in sustainable energy that brings together resilience and decarbonization. So I'm representing Arup here today, and just to frame Arup in terms of the context of this session, really it's about the importance of balance in terms of the needs of our population and the finite capacity and health of our planet. So we've put together an organizational strategy that places sustainability at the center of the activities of how we're engaging with. And that is about a recognition of that we have a particular planet, we have a particular way of living around consumption and urbanization, and there is a particular challenging climate challenge ahead of us. So the wide lens that we apply is around a focus on sustainability objectives, and that is really bringing together the importance of healthy cities, the importance of nature-based solutions, and the importance of behavior. So if I look at innovation in climate action and the global transition itself, what we are, the main focus is a movement or a transition away from fossil fuel. And that was one of the main outcomes, as we saw in COP26, this idea of phasing down fossil, moving away from subsidies. And what does that mean, really? It means that it's more proactive in terms of climate action. It's more proactive in terms of safety. This idea of replacing our existing energy systems and transportation systems with zero emission fuels and processes that ultimately that impacts our lives, it impacts our economy, it impacts the methods and the materials, and it provides more sustainability in the longer term. So over the next maybe 3 to 4 minutes, I'm going to touch on a few projects that Arup is directly involved in with different clients, be it public sector, private sector, some in Europe, some in the global north, some in the global south. So the first one, just to center it on Scotland, really is about understanding that innovation is important in terms of our transportation systems. And what we have worked closely with the Scottish Government in terms of achieving a net zero approach by 2045, and the role that hydrogen will play in that approach. So we've considered different types of market development scenarios in terms of the deployment of hydrogen as a policy from a transportation perspective, and the role that it would play in terms of energy storage. Moving a little away from the UK and Scotland, and looking at more work that we would have done in collaboration with the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, where we closely are working on green climate action plans. The ones that in cities like Tirana, in Sofia, in Zenica, and all the way to Split in Croatia. And what this involves is working with the cities themselves in terms of framing a multidisciplinary climate action plans where the citizens become the center of those plans. And those can be focusing on energy efficiency or climate resilient buildings. Water has a huge role to play in this, and actually the regeneration of brownfield land sites as well. And more importantly, in the last couple of years, we've seen a large role that active travel, nature-based solutions will play in such planning. If we move then into more, move from decarbonization to something that focuses more on resilience. So we're collaborating with the 100 Resilient Cities program and supporting a number of cities from Amman to Glasgow, all the way in terms of understanding the responses to the stress that is placed on systems and the risks that are placed on systems from climate action, and the importance of understanding extreme weather shocks and being prepared and having more city resilience plans in the face of such shocks. This section is focusing on innovation, and I thought I would just select one from the airport in the Philippines, where we worked very closely in terms of development of a 3-story building that delivers an arch timber roof, different types of structure. This idea of the design and repurposing materials, the circularity of those materials become really important. And it's a low carbon footprint when you compare it to alternatives such as steel and cement. And really, this is about promoting more sustainable sources and having a smaller footprint in terms of the built environment. And then an area that is really close to my heart is active travel, in terms of having more attention being placed to the outdoors, greening of the infrastructure. And we worked closely in Singapore on active travel, an area called Rowers Bay, which was really around focusing on an island route, green corridors, focus on the citizens and connecting the visitors by foot and all of the different attractions within the city. And that ended up being just over a 21-kilometer north-south corridor project that brings together different types of transport, brings together different types of mobility, and actually puts the citizen at the center of the of active travel and climate action. And then finally, when we talk about resilience, often the face of resilience is seen as loss and damage in many ways, or recovering from a disaster. And I'm giving the example here in terms of a landslide that happened in Sierra Leone, and traveling through 6 kilometers through the city, and the impact that would have. So we brought together expertise from a geology perspective, from an engineering perspective, collaborated with the World Bank to assess the damage and put together a plan in terms of reconstruction to stabilize the slope, prevent further landslides, and actually ultimately a forestation program in terms of planting of native trees, and the importance of training, capacity development in terms of United Nations Office for Project Services. So it shows the diversity really of the types of innovation that's required to enhance resilience, promote more decarbonisation, and actually get us more in terms of the objectives of what the Paris Agreement is doing. So I'll pause now, but certainly happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Matt. That was really fascinating to hear what you guys are up to at Arup. You were quite involved at COP as well, weren't you? The most recent one, COP26. Can you tell us a little energy transition means in the context of COP?
Yes. So from my perspective, often the COP is around somewhere where government gets together to collaborate and talk within meeting rooms and areas. So it was interesting to see that in the last number of years, the private sector and civil society has become much more active at COP in terms of not only the environmental NGOs were always placing attention on the role of what governments need to do in terms of drawing attention to the challenge, but now I think there's a much larger role for non-state actors at COP. The transition becomes really important. So what Glasgow showed is that there's a natural tendency now and movement from a financial perspective, from a government perspective, and from an industry perspective to turn your back really on fossil fuels. That there is a transition that's going on. All of the markets are sending those signals in terms of a transition for more low carbon energy, and ultimately that transition then needs to be fair, it needs to be equitable, and it needs to be just. And I think these are the principles in which the transition needs to be made, and that's why the challenge in many ways from a climate action perspective, and the challenge under the UN is to frame the actions that can deliver on that just transition.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that those points there that you made at the end there about being fair and equitable and just, I think that those will themes that will crop up time and time again, I'm sure. And there's a question that's come in from Rachel here, who works for Bats Without Borders. And she was asking about how she's seen a lot about energy developments having devastating impacts on biodiversity. So she's just wondering if you can say something to that, how can we make sure that any developments take into account the biodiversity of local areas? Yeah,
so it's a great question. There has always been a tendency in the built environment to look at the fabric and look inside the building and not look outside the building. And I think that training and that lens in which people look in terms of infrastructure projects has completely changed over the last number of years. So when I pull together a team in terms of delivering some work on a project, it isn't just about the engineers. I'm often bringing in ecologists, bringing in urban designers, landscape architects, GIS traditions and disciplines. And all of these components come together to understand how our built environment impacts in terms of nature, impacts in terms of our landscape, and impacts in terms of the citizens. And the promotion of biodiversity, maintenance of the solutions and nature around that building and that built environment becomes really important, because the lens is not just inside the building, but it's outside the building. So any solution that I would pursue would really be about catering for the natural environment that exists within it, maintaining it, and actually enhancing it. And I think promotion of biodiversity is one means of achieving those objectives.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. There's another question about Sierra Leone and the landslide picture that you showed. And Jill Matthews was wondering, would that landslide have happened in Sierra Leone if there were no houses there? She said she was there in the 1980s.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. It's very hard to get a clear answer. What I would say is that climatic effects are impacting they're impacting our landscape in a way that they never did before. And I do think that future design and engineering needs to consider the changing temperatures, the changing climatic impact, and reinforcing them and stabilizing such kind of such nature and such landscapes. And I think what we're seeing, this just an African challenge. It isn't just an Asian challenge. I think we do need to consider that the impact that new build, be our existing residential houses, new infrastructure impacts, and we do need to consider the natural environment around that and the risk that that will pose if adverse climate impacts affect that. So really, coming at it from a design perspective, you just need to consider those dimensions when you go to build. You're not just building for now, you're building for a particular climatic event that could affect a landscape in the future.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier in your presentation about green corridors, and obviously in urban planning, and we see a lot about spongy cities and building in that resilience into urban space to be able to literally to absorb excess water. And we know that we're going to have, more extreme events, and so literally building into the urban space the capability of the space to be able to absorb that water rather than have so much runoff.
Absolutely, it's come on leaps and bounds. I think when we talk about resilience in water, it was just about avoidance of flooding, and I think really, like in the last 10 years, the impact of sponge cities, the impact of bringing together different types of skills around hydrology and improving their natural environment from a greening perspective, but also in terms of resource consumption and the water impact and reducing that, minimizing the water impact. These all become critical components within cities.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, we've had an awesome question from Eric, but I'm going to hold it for the moment till the end, if you don't mind, so that we can pass over to Ainslie Chinembiri. So Ainslie, thank you very much, Matt, for your lovely presentation, very thought-provoking. And Ainslie, if we can pass over to you now. So Ainslie is the CEO of Chitendai Limited, a Scottish-based company that works a lot in Southern Africa in the renewable sector. So Ainslie, over to you, please.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I'm Ainslie Chinembiri, the CEO of Chitendai Limited. We are the manufacturers of the iRadiant solar panel, and we co-develop or assist in the development of solar installations that use the iRadiant solar panel. So first of all, I want to thank you all for allowing me to present to you today, to tell you a little bit about what Chitendai is doing, our values and why we exist, and hopefully we can connect and maybe start up a relationship. So we're all gathered here because we recognize the challenges around the world, the inequalities and injustices around the world. And I guess we're all trying to do something. We all recognize these challenges that people in the Global South are facing, and we're all trying to do our very best to address some of the risks of many of the people in the Global South, such as those risks might be environmental or economic, whatever it may be. So what we did is we set up Chitendai in 2013 on that fundamental principle of care. We care about people, climate, and biodiversity. And because we care, we're continually in search of excellence to be better in a differentiated manner. So we developed the iRadiant solar panel and business models that make electricity more accessible and affordable. The irradiant solar panel itself is 43% more efficient and generates up to 4 times more electricity than your standard solar panels that you get, standard PV that you get on the market today. When we set up Chitendai, we were driven really by that fundamental principle of care. We were looking to address some of the issues that myself experienced and a lot of my family are experiencing. So I want to tell you a little bit more about, first of all, about our values and why we care. So though we set up Chitendai in 2013, our journey actually started many decades earlier. It started with a 10-year-old rural boy who was harvesting sweet potatoes with his mum in a farmer's field. And with tears streaming down both their faces, I said to him, which means, let's persevere to earn the money to send you to school, my son. So in that sweet potato field, my grandmother taught my father values such as perseverance, faith, and I guess diligence as well, that would sustain me as an adult and form the foundations of Chitendai. That 10-year-old rural boy who was destined to become a cattle herder later grew to be the CEO of a successful life insurance company. And thankfully for him, he married a very loving and cheerful woman, who was my mum, and hardworking woman, my mum. And I describe my mum in that manner because she agreed to help him raise 20 other members, well, not just raise and educate over 20 other members of his family. So for a period in my life, I lived in a 3-bedroom house with 15 other members and with 15 other people. So you imagine it was quite tight, as you can imagine. But those were some of the most enjoyable years of my life, primarily because even now, nearly 30 years on, memories of that time conjure up the strongest emotional reactions in me. That period in my life taught me a lot about relationships. And it's on this fundamental basis of relationships that that Chitendai's business models are based. We want to develop relationships with customers, with people in Africa over a long period of time, not short-term relationships, but over a long period of time, 25 years, with customers that are using our technology so that they get the best out of our technology. So I guess your question is, so what was the catalyst? How did you start up on this journey? Why did you start up this? Why did you look at this technology? So when I left Zimbabwe to come to the UK to further my education, as you can imagine, connecting with my loved ones and my family was of paramount importance. In fact, I can remember one particular Christmas, that phone call to my family was like my Christmas dinner. You know, that's what I looked forward to. I remember getting up in the morning, getting dressed, tidying up my flat, dressed up smart as my mother would have expected, combing my hair as my mom would have expected, even though she wouldn't have been able to see me, and going downstairs to a call box here in the UK to make a 2-3 hour phone call. You know, that connection with my family was of paramount importance. It's what sustained me whilst I was studying here. But the problem is that at times I couldn't get through. I mean, that particular Christmas I did get through. I did manage to speak to my family, but at times I wouldn't be able to get through because there were constant power cuts. It's what I would call irregular power cuts. So we knew that the power cuts would come. We just didn't know when and for how long. So those times when I tried to connect with my family and I couldn't connect, it was very frustrating. And that frustration over a number of years actually drove me to inquire, to understand why can't we get electricity? Why can't we make sure that my family got electricity? And it then grew to become more than just about my family. It became many other people were experiencing the same thing that we were experiencing, couldn't connect with their families in Southern Africa, particularly. So that prompted that discussion, that need to find out why and how we can make things better. And there was also a need to understand how can we do it in a way that's equitable. How can people also benefit? How can the people in Southern Africa, in Africa as a whole, benefit as well? Not just by buying kits from Europe, but also to allow them to create jobs, to educate, and to provide, to allow them to provide health and care facilities. So that's how that journey started. And and since then, what we've been able to do is we've been able to develop relationships with many partners. So we got partners in Zambia, working with the United Church of Zambia to allow them to, to provide electricity to their healthcare, to their hospitals and clinics in Zambia. The solutions that we're developing with the United Church of Zambia will see the electricity cost drop by nearly 30%. It will hopefully, we expect that it will eliminate all power cuts to the hospitals and clinics that are used by or that are run by the United Church of Zambia. So at the moment, in some parts of Zambia, they're experiencing 13-hour-a-day power cuts, this particular area called Mbereshi. And we're also developing other relationships with other partners in Tunisia and in South Africa. So I'm hoping we can do the same we can develop relationships with many of you and many of your customers, many of your partners in Africa and across the world to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Ainslie. That was a really lovely, actually, kind of journey through what's taken you to be in the technology and innovation sector now. And you mentioned at the top that you co-develop your projects. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so it's really comes down to it's about relationships. So what we do is we give an example with the Zambia situation. We partner up with the customer, the United Church of Zambia, and we try and understand what are their challenges. And by understanding the challenges, we then are able to come up with a solution. We recognize that not every solution will be the same for every customer. So what we try to do is to find the best fit. So we look for financing solutions for the customer. We look for engineering solutions for the customer, so that it fits best for that particular customer. So not every situation will be the same.
So it's not by really what you mean by that then is that you've got a technology, but it's not always a one-fits-all solution. So it's really
Absolutely.
Working with kind of the local partners on the ground to work out how to finance it and what, how best to shape that technology for that particular instance.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So we recognize that, to give an example, we've got different types of models. We got a utility scale. A lot of people, when they think about solar, they think about utility scale projects. So the large solar farms, and a lot of the times that's seen as the most cost-effective way of providing electricity. But in Africa, a large part of the problem is getting the electricity from the nearest town or for the nearest big city to the next town. It's extending the grid. That's the biggest problem. So by building a large solar farm, it's not really going to help. It's not going to really help those people in those rural parts of Africa. So what you need to do is you need to develop a different solution, which is what we call a distributed solution that generates electricity locally within that region. And hopefully, the expectation is that that installation will generate electricity for that community, and then allow for extension of the grid thereafter at a later date.
Okay, so a much more kind of decentralized approach then.
Absolutely, it's a very decentralized approach, and it's it's finance sensitive. We look to find a financing solution. We work with other partners, financing partners, to find the best financing solution for that particular customer.
It sounds like we've got somebody joining us from their friend's house in Aberdeenshire, and Jill's had no power since Friday. So maybe Zambia isn't where you should be working. Maybe it's Aberdeenshire.
Well, actually, distributed solutions will be a very good solution for these types of events. It improves distributed solutions, improve the security, the supply of electricity for many communities.
Absolutely. I think the same could be said in the water sector as well, particularly in rural Scotland, where I've been working as well. And there was a question earlier about biodiversity, and I know it's something that you're very passionate about as well. Is that something, what do you have to say about how you build in kind of consciousness about biodiversity to your projects?
Yeah, so we're very conscious about that. I mean, 70% of the world's utility scale renewable energy projects are in areas considered sensitive or important to the natural environment. So it's absolutely important that we try and preserve our natural environment as much as possible. So what we're doing is, well, with our technology, we use a quarter of the space required with standard PV. So that's a big advantage. But with our models, with our business models, we're trying to bring the electricity closer to where the electricity closer to where it's consumed. So in essence, we're generating electricity closer to where the customer is. By doing that, you actually improve efficiency. You improve the efficiency of energy generation, but you also you have less of an impact on the flora and fauna, which is around different cities and towns.
Wow, really fascinating stuff. Thank you very much, Ainslie. I'm sure there'll be some questions coming into you that we'll ask later on, but for now, thank you very much, and we will hand over to Maggie, please. Maggie Ngwira, who's joining us from Malawi. Hi, Maggie.
Hi, so I am Maggie Ngwira from Malawi. I work with Trocaire. So in this conversation, we would like to present to you a community-led approach that was used in our program, a program called the Climate Challenge Program Malawi, which is a four-year program. It's community-led climate justice program that was funded by the Scottish government. In the 4 years, we have increased the access of food, water to almost 50,000 people and empowered over 500 women into leadership positions, not just leadership positions, but positions where they can make decisions. We singled out women particularly because we understood that they are more vulnerable to the challenges that come with climate change. And Malawi is one of the countries that is experiencing some of the worst impacts of climate change, from floods to drought, and particularly because as a country, we're dependent on the environment. So we are an agro-based economy. So in today's panel, we would like to discuss our innovative approach that we used to improve food production by using a sustainable agroecology model that uses locally available resources, but also our research on indigenous early warning systems.
Thank you, Maggie. Do you have some slides to share?
So I would share the slides, but they're on the indigenous knowledge. And so I've said that one of the things that we looked at was an approach where we wanted to integrate scientific knowledge, but also local knowledge. So scientific knowledge, we have the information is there. Like the Department of Meteorological Services, they produce the scientific knowledge, they produce the forecast. But what was lacking as a country that we're working in 4 districts, which were as of research, were shown to be prone to climate change impacts. So the documentation of the indigenous knowledge was very lacking. So we understood that indigenous knowledge is readily available to people, and it's area specific. It's what people have used since time immemorial, and it's what they find reliable. But also as Malawi as a country where scientific knowledge is not over the years, it has not been area specific, so people sort of lost trust in it, because what they would be forecasted is not what would happen. So people still believe indigenous knowledge. So what we did in the program, I'll share the slides. What we did in the program was that we did a study in the areas that we're working in the 4 districts that we're working in the 7 traditional authorities that we're working in, to find out what are the knowledges, what are the systems that the communities that we're working with have identified as indicators to the seasons, especially the rainfall season, because as an agro-based economy, with mostly the rainfall season is very important to the people. So when the study was done, and we found a number of indicators that the communities use. I'm trying to share my screen.
Maggie, if you've got the 3 dots down at the bottom, there should be a share my screen option. Can you see that?
Yep.
Otherwise, don't worry about it. I'm sure you can just talk us through. Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
Yeah. So we did a study where we looked at the indicators, and what we found that was the communities have identified, they have about 4 main indicators that they look at. So 90% of them were animal-based, and then they were plant-based as the second, and then we have hydrometeorological related indicators, and then we have astrological indicators, and then we have others that are not in that category. So we looked at, just to give an example, for this is one of the districts that we're working on. Sorry, the font is very not as clear, but we looked at the different communities had different things that they look at. So for example, if you have abundant presence of ants for that community, they would know that there would be heavy rains, and then that would lead to floods. But also, so for example, in the plant-based, they will look at abundant of flowering, for example, for a mango tree, then they will know that in that year, there would be very low yields. So in these are the indicators that the communities have identified that they look at, and they plan accordingly. Particularly, their planning would be around their agricultural activities. So what I just want to also show us, so for example, you have that anti-hill. The anti-hill in its signals, for them, they would know that the rainfall season is about to start. So if you want to start land preparation, then they would use that as they will start their land preparation. And then for example, you have two signals there, indicators there. You have the mango tree, and then you have the baobab tree. When the mango tree and the baobab tree have flowers, so much flowers in that year, they know that the yields are going to be lower. But that is not the same in all districts, because in some districts, when that happens, they would have they would know that probably it's a good year. So the fact that these indigenous early warning systems, because this is traditional knowledge, they're area specific, so they have to be specific to a country, to a particular context. So what we did was that we combine this information with the scientific knowledge in what is known as the participatory scenario planning. So we have a participatory scenario planning session. We've had participatory scenario planning sessions with the communities that we work with support from the Department of Meteorological Services, where they provide the forecast, the scientific forecast, and then they have a conversation with the communities of what they've also forecasted using their traditional knowledge. So they would have these two different knowledge and see where they are meeting or where their divergences, but also then they would plan according to the different scenarios that would come. So either you would have above normal rain, or you have below normal rain. So you'd plan according to all these 3 scenarios. So we found that this was very important because it allowed the communities to be prepared, but also not only to put in preparation measures in terms of disasters, but also to put in preparation measures on what crops to grow, what plans to put. So they would also support the contingency plannings for the districts, for the local communities, so they put in so that with whatever scenarios they are already prepared, instead of acting ad hoc as a situations occur. So that's one of the innovations that we found. A variant to the participatory scenario planning is what is known as is particularly focused on the agriculture. So there's also a participatory planning that is looking at the agriculture. So looking at what crops you should, the agriculture department uses these 2 different sources of information, weather forecast, to advise the communities on what crops to grow, what practices, agricultural practices to follow. So for example, for us, another innovation that we followed the agroecological approach. So agroecological approach is where your farming practices are in tune with the ecological zone that you are in. So in tune with the weather that you are in, the land, the animals, and all that, the ecology of the area that you are in. So with that, there was a focus on use of local resources, because the agroecological practices, you're looking at agroecological practices that are sustainable, that would allow you to not disturb the environment further, but that would allow you to conserve the environment, but also at the same time as you're yielding better yields from your production. So in the agroecological practices, some of the practices that you would use, for example, would be mixed cropping. So mixed cropping can support you to have crop diversification or food diversification, but also it allows you to, it's a pests and disease management measure. So you can also instead of bringing in chemicals, pesticides and all that, you can use the crops themselves so that they can repel, so that some crops, for example, onion would repel insects and all that. So in the end, your crops among themselves, they're protecting each other. But also you'd have approaches where you're looking at conservation of water and the soil. So for example, the mulching and zero tillage, where you're reducing tilling the land so that it conserves moisture, but also you're putting in soil cover so that you conserve moisture, especially in this era where we have so much of dry spells. So that we have seen in the program that has supported the communities to still harvest, even though we have experienced a lot of dry spells. So those are some of the innovations that we have used in this development program that
it's absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Maggie. I mean, I'm sure lots of people will be really interested in what you've had to say there. There's a question there about women's empowerment and in programming, and asking about the strategies that you used to include women in your in the work that you've been doing.
So this climate change program Malawi, I think two things that I need to cite is that it's a community-led program. So in community-led program, in the sense that in the design of the program, in the development of the program, we engage the communities first. So we used an approach that I'm sure people in the development sector would know, the participative vulnerability capacity assessment, where we worked with the communities to identify what are the challenges that they face in regard to climate change, but also what are the capacities, what are the resources that they have within the communities. So, and then from there, they would be able to identify what are the interventions that we would need to deal with the challenges that we have. So each of the 4 districts that we worked in, they identified their own challenges, they identified their own solutions, and those solutions are what informed the program. So when we went into the different districts, we did not have activities laid out. We went into those communities, and the communities decided for themselves that this is what we want to do to deal with challenges that come with climate change. So one of the things that came out was that women, as I've said, were some of the most vulnerable population. In the district that we're working in, most of the households are women-led. So you'd either the husbands have left the country, they've gone to South Africa to seek for greener pastures, or they've gone to town, they've left their families. But also, apart from that, the households are female-led, but also women in Malawi, most of them bear a lot of responsibilities. So either because of the productive roles or the reproductive roles. So what comes with climate change puts a further burden on them. So with that understanding, we put a deliberate measure to ensure that women are at the center. So I liked what Matt said, that people, the citizens, become the center of the plans. So basically that's what, for example, we did in the climate change, where we had the people at the center of the plans, but particularly we had a particular focus for women, where we say that women are the ones that stay in the community, are the ones that face, for example, if there's water shortages, they're the ones that go looking for water, walking these miles to look for water. If there's food, the women are the ones that look for food and start looking to prepare. If there's energy, the issue of electricity, like what I'm trying to remember the name. Yeah, but if there's look for energy for cooking, so they're the ones that would go looking for firewood in the mountains distance. So if we have to solve challenges of climate change, they have to be the ones we have to put a particular focus on them. So we did in our interventions, we, as much as we had, it wasn't a gender, it wasn't a women-based focused program, but we have a particular interest for women. So we had ratios where, for example, if there's committees in the local communities, development committees in the local communities, they have to be a ratio, say 60% have to be women and 40% have to be men. And if we are doing interventions, we would particularly focus on women as well, because we understand that they're the ones that are facing most of the worst impacts of climate change. But also, as much as they're facing the worst impact of climate change, they are also potential drivers of contributing to climate change because of their need to find, they need to find to support their livelihoods. They go on into activities or activities that are extractive, that would further cause degradation. So as a program, we made, from the design of the program, we sought views from women specifically, as much as we sought from other people in the community. But also we did trainings of gender trainings in all we integrated them in our programming. So all the trainings, say for example, of food production or energy or advocacy on climate justice, we integrated gender training in all the program. But also, like I've said, that we had quotas of all the community structures committees. We have to have a representation of women, and not just a representation of women, but the women should be in those decision-making positions. Okay. So that, as say, if they're making a contingency plan, they should have views from the women as well.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Maggie. That was a really comprehensive answer. That was great. We've had some questions in about innovation and how we frame innovation, and I think that's probably a really interesting question to pick up for all of our panel members, actually, because I think it touches on an awful lot of our questions. But I will ask Dorcas if we can you join us, Dorcas, and we'll see you. Thank you very much, Maggie. Is Dorcas there? Have we lost her?
So it's best to be offline, I mean off camera, and then if I show my face, like for a while, it will
No, we like your face. So Dorcas, you want to take it away? You head up the advisory unit of Challenges Ghana. Yeah. So tell us about your work, please, and what you're up to.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Stephanie. And thanks to all the panelists who've spoken so far. Definitely very grateful to be part of the panel. I'm hearing a lot of things here that I can definitely agree with, and I keep nodding. Yes, that's it. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas. So a little bit about me. I have a business background, so business administration background, and therefore, in a lot of my education, I've really been looking at profits and seeing how to maximize profits as businesses. But then inherently, I'll say I've had a lot of idealistic views about life and about development and leaving no one behind. And so after my business administration program, I decided to pursue something in development. And after development, I realized that, well, everyone is looking for solutions. So everyone wants to find solutions. And based on my two backgrounds, can I find a way to merge these backgrounds and create developments whilst promoting enterprising solutions and business solutions? That's how come I found Challenges, and I've been with Challenges ever since. So challenges, a little bit about challenges. I know a few people will be asking. Challenges started in 1999, so we are like 22 years, and we haven't been shouting that much, but we've done a lot of work within the development space. But we started with a focus as enterprise, as a vehicle for change. So 22 years down the line, we've worked in over 70 countries, supporting about 3,500 SMEs across emerging markets. 6 years ago, we took a deliberate strategy to have footprints in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, and recruit locals. I hear people talking about context a lot, and using local knowledge to recruit local expertise to be able to drive the transformative change we want to see on the continent. And I'll say that's been a game changer in our approach to working, because these local expertise understand the context, they understand the difference between root causes and just symptoms, and have the I'll say inherent drive to achieve the change themselves, which has been great. So since 1999, the focus has still been the same. It's still and using enterprising solutions to solve global challenges, with collaboration with other stakeholders and partners at the heart of the model. So a few things on what we've done in the green space. I just want to share a few projects that we've worked on in the green space and what's been our approach. And I'll say recently, in the past couple of years, we have begun to really look keenly at the green space, bringing our expertise to support the space, because we know that green is the future. And we better address the future now, lest we all fall prey soon. And so recently here in Ghana, we've worked with the Ghana Climate Innovation Center. Because a lot of our work has been with businesses, we have really partnered with green incubators and accelerators supporting these businesses. So we work with them understanding market systems and developing market models around their innovations, so that they could learn more about their markets, provide targeted, as Chitendai said, targeted, so tailored solutions for their market, but most importantly, get their revenue models right, so that it's sustainable for them. We did the same with SNV, looking at green. So the SNV Green Project is trying to create green hubs in Ghana. So rather than reinventing the wheel, we looked into various accelerators and incubators across the country, and figured out which one of them are most suitable and I'll say can incorporate change to be able to build these green innovations and green businesses in Ghana. In Malawi as well. So we have the privilege of working in different countries, like 5 countries across Africa, and our headquarters is in Scotland. So there's a lot of shared learning, which has been great for us. In Malawi as well, using we have some value addition centers that we run in Malawi. And one of COVID, well, I'll say, they said crisis is always the mother of inventions. So COVID posed a huge challenge, where a lot of the farmers that work within that supply chain to these value addition centers had limited access to fertilizers for their crops. So then we were able to come together with some partners and also kickstart an enterprise providing organic fertilizers for these farmers, reducing the carbon footprints within the chain, which has been great. And surprisingly, we have seen, I should think that my colleague Philip, who is in Malawi, is on this call. We have seen very interesting uptakes, and demand has literally gone off the roof, and we're now finding ways to be able to meet that demand. But in Uganda as well, we have supported renewable energy companies to really look into their businesses, understand where the management and capacity and operational gaps are, and then work towards changing those to meet their market needs as well. And then finally, I'll speak about one last work we did with WACA, which is the West African Primates Conservation Action, based in the UK, and they have an office here, and they have been working quite well with rural associations to drive conservation actions. But one other thing I have been in the space I have seen is when you bring business thinking or enterprise thinking to especially the informal sector, it changes things drastically, right? So we were able to go in there, train these local smart young and older people who are driving this change themselves. Like they are going on parades. They are touring the forest just to make sure people do not operate illegally in these conservation areas. And it was just fascinating to see some of the results where people say, oh, the idea of learning why, or the need to record, as a farmer has changed the nature of my business. Now I can understand and calculate, what my profit is, where my money is going, what I should do, right? So those very little, we wouldn't call that the big innovations, right? But those very little additions to existing models has been tremendous. Now, I will just want to share a few ideas based on my work in the space, and you can call it challenges, you can call it opportunities, based on the lens that you want to see it from. But then what I have found out relatively short time in the space, right, is if we want to really scale up green innovations, then we should be thinking about building innovations around market systems, right? Markets makes it more sustainable. Markets means that, and I'll say enterprise inherently makes things innovative, because you can have a business. Day one, the business is up. Day two, the business is not doing too well with the market. Then it causes you to think, what's happening in the space, right? What do I need to change? What do I need to adapt to ensure that the business picks up? So an enterprise approach to things brings out the innovation more and more, and keeps them innovating going on. Secondly, I have seen a lot of situations where we've had labels for different things. So fair trade, organic, and increasingly, green is becoming one of these labels. Increasingly, and renewable as well. Increasingly, these innovations are not affordable for the masses who need to use them, right? And so you cut off like the bottom of the pyramid, and when you put a label on there. And I think as we consistently talk about these green innovations, we should look at the element of affordability in these innovations. And I was very happy with what Chitendai had said around his innovation and how they try to make it affordable for its users. Okay, the final thing I would share is that green innovations will thrive if only we have a thriving and a robust ecosystem for building these innovations. And so as we look at individual innovations, we should also look at the collective and how they fit into each other and support the entire ecosystem. That's the only way we can go far in our approach to addressing climate change as a challenge. Yeah, I'll end here and open up for any questions.
Thank you very much, Dorcas. That's lots of food for thought there. You were talking there about the Ghana Climate Innovation Centre and also about green incubators. Some of our audience might not know what those are or what the purpose is of an incubator. Can you tell us a little bit about what they are and what they do and what kind of technologies are developed that you've been involved in there?
Okay, thank you very much. So incubators are programs, I would say, and sometimes organizations that seek to help young entrepreneurs kickstart their business. Incubators usually are idea, more like the idea stage of a business. So they help people frame their thoughts, frame their business plans, and frame their revenue models around these businesses. And then we have another level which we call accelerators. Sometimes I just think they are just buzzwords in the development sector, but we have another level which is called an accelerator, which sort of I'll say leapfrogs the new business to another level, whole new. So green incubators and accelerators are specifically for green businesses or green SMEs. So SMEs doing things within the green space, so coming up with innovations or technologies or even maybe a process of doing things, right? And so they have realizing the importance of the space and the fact that we need to start looking more critically at these people. And if you really look at it critically, green businesses need a different kind. They're not like any other SMEs. Like they need some bit of a different kind of support, a different approach to even financing. As much as possible, patience financing that can look into 20 years and still wait. Right, so these incubators try to bring in the expertise to be able to frame these into prototypes, into products that can go to market. And one of the things that we have seen that's somewhat lacking within the space is the go-to-market bit, and supporting people to really understand and leverage on it, to sell off their products. But yeah, I hope that.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And I saw Ainslie nodding his head quite a lot around the financing of innovation and green solutions. And I think that's probably one of the most important things, and thinking about how we can drive forward collaboration and innovative ways of financing. I mean, one of the things that I've been involved in a little bit is impact investing. And I don't know if, Ainslie, you want to talk a bit about that and how impact investing, in that kind of model, you need to work very closely with communities in order to demonstrate what that impact brings. So that probably talks to actually what Maggie was saying there about involving local communities and Indigenous knowledge. Ainslie, if you wanted to say a little bit on that.
Yeah, so I'll just say a little bit. You're absolutely right. Impact investing, that's becoming how do you describe it? More and more important nowadays. But you're right in the sense that in order to be able to attract the impact investors, there needs to be that you need to be able to show that link between the local communities. It does mean that there is a lot more work in order to demonstrate that. You need to collect a lot more data in order to demonstrate that you are having an impact. But it's actually good. It's actually very, very good because you're empowering people. In the grassroots, probably if that's the right word to describe that group of people. But you also you're creating a link for the investors who got excess cash to invest in viable projects and very viable projects. So yeah, absolutely. ESG is another term that's being
ESG stands for?
So I beg your pardon, environmental, social, and governance. So ESG is becoming even more, it's becoming an even bigger thing. And recently we've been actually engaged with blockchain companies who are trying to get into that space. So in essence, they are blockchain type of companies that are linking investors with companies or projects that are involved in the environmental, social, and governance space. So it is thing now and a lot more important.
And I wanted to ask Matt. I mean, obviously, you gave us quite a kind of big picture, kind of presentation, I guess, or and understandably so, because that's kind of what Arup is all about. But when you hear kind of what Dorcas and Maggie have been talking about, particularly Maggie's work with Indigenous knowledge and communities, is that something that you at Arup pay much attention to? Is it when you talk about kind of innovative thinking and innovative working, how much do you involve kind of local communities and kind of, I guess, innovative ways of working in terms of gathering Indigenous knowledge and using that for along with your work?
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. So this is hugely important. So there's sides of Arup that have international development arms associated with them that work with vulnerable communities. But the important point is that projects that happen within countries need collaborators within those countries. They need organizations, they need civil society to be engaged. And that partnership with that collaborative approach is something that Arup cherishes, really, because otherwise the old view of professional services firms being parachuted in and to deliver a project and then getting on the plane and going, that model just doesn't work. The outcomes, the sustainable outcomes, don't get delivered in that type of business model. So the collaboration with, whether they're incubation organizations, and I have a huge interest in such, or SMEs, or organizations from an NGO perspective, or even businesses within the particular country, it's really important that we collaborate with those types of entities in terms of delivering services and delivering our own projects. And just picking up on a couple of points also, it's also not about bringing in a concept that has worked in a different jurisdiction and then expecting it to work as well. So whether that's taking advantage of the raw talent that exists within countries, and that's about understanding the capabilities of individuals within countries and the skill set, what I refer to endogenous technologies would be. So the indigenous organizations within the country and how they have developed their own technologies and taking advantage of those as well, and bringing those to market through projects. And also generally just engaging with organizations and entities within those countries, building on their capabilities, their natural resources, and not having a project that was being developed somewhere else without any understanding of the capabilities, of the capacities, or the policies within that country. Everything, in my view, needs to be country driven, and that involves the individuals, the technologies, the capacities, and the organizations within those countries, helping to drive them.
And from Maggie is that actually it's not even about a country level. It's much more local than even that. Maggie, there was a question in the Q&A about how do we help Indigenous people resist corporates, or do we work to make corporates more responsible, or is it, do we have to sort of do it hand in hand?
So I don't think it's an issue of resisting corporate, but it's an issue of seeing that the good that is coming from the corporate is also it's recognized by the communities, but it's also being shared by them. So it's working not necessarily for the good for the people that are just coming into the communities, but the locals should also see the value of that investment in their communities, and ensuring that as you're doing that, you're working within the resources that the communities have, instead of disturbing more like disturbing the balance in that community. So it's not an issue of resisting, but making sure that it works also for the benefit of the communities, and ensuring that. So I think that's where the conversation of the different stakeholders that are there is relevant, that they're able to design that corporate investment that also benefits the communities where that intervention is coming in.
And in terms of documenting the knowledge that you've gathered, then is that openly available? Is that something that people can look at? How do you document it and share it so that people, I don't know, if Ainslie was going to work in Malawi, that he could access that knowledge as well?
So for this, the study that we did, it's on our website, for the program website. So we can, I think we should be able to share the link on the Climate Challenge Program Malawi website. So yeah, it's open to be shared to the general public. So we've also shared like with all the different stakeholders that I worked with. So the meteorological department, they also have a copy. But also we should understand that this is local community knowledge, so it should not be generalized to represent Malawi as a whole. But also we should also understand that this is this local knowledge is changing depending on also because of the climate, of changing in the climate. So what would be true now might not be the same 5 years to come. So I think it's we should have that in mind when we're using this information.
And really acknowledging how quickly things can change.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dorcas, when you were talking about the kind of the innovation spaces that you're working in Ghana, I'm kind of interested, especially with challenges, because they work across so many different countries. Do you share the knowledge across different countries? I mean, do you learn from the Scottish example, for example, or, around kind of green technologies and innovating? Is there sharing between the different territories that challenges operate in? Oh, you're on mute if you can hear us, or you're trying to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Almost got a heart attack, but it's fine. Yeah. So I was just going to go into the heart of that when Matt mentioned collaboration, right? Because I think as he said, collaborating with external stakeholders, but what's been very great for us as an organization is collaborating within. And there's been so much sharing and cross-learning for us, and I can give examples here. So up in Rwanda, we started a program in the coffee space, trying to support farmers to be able to grow coffee, which is then to Scotland and Scottish companies there. And then off the shoot of that program came the need, there's coffee is a whole value chain, right? But then due to the gaps within the value chain, it makes like the entire process quite cumbersome. And there were young people who were interested in tackling some of the challenges within the value chain. So trying to create a model of financing, very interesting financing with relatively lower rates of interest for these young people to take on the opportunities, right? And so that was an interesting model that started, which has been fantastic so far. And when people say, oh, it's hard to to advance money to it, I think it's about the how you go about it and the kind of support that backs the funding that you. I think people are now willing to go the extra. If you don't take, they come out with blanket list stuff. Oh, it's very difficult to finance, but then it's about the how. And catching that model here in Ghana, we've also started a similar project after space. We are working with another rural community, with a corporate giant, a mining giant that's seeking to diversify its the rural economy. So why not think about other alternatives to economic other economic opportunities apart from mining, where people can risk their lives and get into the wrong, in fact, die as a result of illegal. Working here, looking at other, and we have been able to implement that we've started a process. Let me see that we started the process of implementing that similar model, learning from the context in Ghana as well, and we have many examples of that.
Oh, thank you, Dorcas. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear that. Matt, there was a question earlier about the importance of embodied carbon, and is that concept, is that recognised in the construction industries and also in government policies?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Firstly, when you think that carbon takes up around 40% of the built environment, and then there, in my opinion, there is a real failure to consider embodied carbon at a policy level, but also across industry. I know that's something that my organization, Arup, has committed to doing whole life cycle carbon assessments across all of its buildings. And what does it, for those who may not be aware of that knowledge, what does the whole life cycle mean? It means the embodied energy that goes in. It also means the operational energy, or the operational carbon that goes in. And there's a tendency for policymakers to build stuff and then start talking about how, let's talk about how we can save at an operational level, rather than looking at the materials, or what gets generated, manufactured, transported in terms of the materials and all the construction processes. And that's really what the embodied bit is. And I think it's a huge part. We've collaborated a little with the World Business Council on Sustainable Development that found around 50% of everything is embodied. So if you're just targeting the operational, you're missing a big trick here. You're missing a huge amount of scope for emissions reductions. And as I mentioned, Arup has committed to the whole life cycle carbon assessment. But I fundamentally don't believe at a policy level the policymakers are. It's even on their landscape. It's not even on their lens. When you think about the materials that are transported, or when you think about the construction processes, it's actually suddenly we begin to think about carbon after the projects are built, rather than really what you should be doing from the very start of the idea generation to all the way through, and how you break down an initiative and repurpose it for some other good. And I think that it is changing. We are making some progress, but and we're working closely with people like the World Business Council, but also the World Green Buildings Council, to drive a deeper understanding of the importance of considering embodied carbon.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Matt. Thank you. I mean, certainly from my perspective as someone who is manufacturing water treatment systems in Scotland, trying to even begin to get the information was just an impossibility. It was so hard, and trying to find information from a supply chain so that you could begin to calculate it was so difficult. I know in Scotland, obviously, we've got Zero Waste Scotland that can help trying to dig so that you can get some kind of information, but it's actually extremely difficult to do so. I don't know, Ainslie, if you've got any experience trying to work out your carbon footprint as well.
Yeah, just like you, Stephanie, it is extremely difficult, to try and get that type of information from suppliers. But I mean, we've been fortunate that a lot of in terms of our product, a lot of the components, we got a general idea of how much impact they have in terms of the carbon footprint, and a lot of the components that we use are bespoke components. So we got a good idea of, for instance, a lens. We use lenses in our solar panel. We got a very good idea of the carbon footprint they have, but it's other components like stainless steel, and that make it quite challenging to work out, because we're getting that supply from elsewhere.
Little progress we made. I completely agree with you that environmental product declarations and things like that around the background and the content within the products from a carbon side, organizations are making great progress and striving well to actually communicate better what the contents are within their products and how good or bad they are. And policymakers need to take on those types of declarations when they do their procurement. But we're kind of talking about assessments that are looking at the scope 3 of emissions, looking at how we collaborate on our value chains in terms of making emissions reductions. And there's much more progress that needs to be made in these areas, because we'll never get to a net zero objective without considering the embodied carbon.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a question that's come in about kind of land management, and I think land ownership, and how important that is, obviously for local communities, but also how contested an issue that might be with various developments. I mean, Maggie, I don't know, in the communities that you've worked in, how you ensure land ownership or land management. How do you work with communities so that there's an understanding of rights and justice around land?
Thank you very much. So in the program, we did not really look at the issue of ownership, land ownership, but I would talk to the land tenures that common in the areas that we work with. So most common in the areas that we work with would be communal. So where you have the leaders, local leaders, having authority over the land. And mostly you would have, the land would be family owned. And of course, lately there's been issues of segmentation of the land because the families are growing, and also the issue where the ownership mostly would be in the decision maker of the family, so which most of them would be the men. But also in these communities, apart from where you have the family-owned land, you also have land that is owned by the larger community, which is in the authority of the chief. So that is where you would have interventions, or say, for example, if you're drilling, you want to install an irrigation scheme in your program, then mostly it would be the chief who would give land in those areas. So for that communal land is also where there's a lot of activities, would say, so soil and water management activities. So would take it at that communal land at that large scale instead of just at the household level. So we have not really worked on the land tenure issue and all that, but we have worked within the procedures that the communities in that particular area have put up if we are looking for land to work on in interventions. Of course, lately, I think because most of the areas that we're working with are in the rural communities, so there's not as much real estate issues or people coming in to buy land. So those issues are still not an issue. It's the land is still by community owned, but also owned by the families. But otherwise, I think as time is going and the districts are growing, I think that issue might be coming in. I think another issue that I might mention is that because the areas that we're working with are disaster-prone areas. Most of them are disaster-prone areas. So some of them are areas where the government has indicated to say that the people have to move. They have to move to for example, higher land and all that. So I think that's where I would say conflicts would come in on the issue of land. For example, for the people that would have been in the areas that they have been indicated to move. So the issues of where do they move to? The government has to come in to allocate land for these communities. But otherwise, you would have in most cases, you'd have situations where this family that has been told to move, they're operating more like two households. So they have a temporal household in the areas where there's a lot of flooding, and then they have a house in the areas where they've moved to, which are the higher land. But otherwise, these are mostly community-owned or communal-owned areas, land.
Gosh, so when you're talking about then, climate change kind of resilience, I mean, and different strategies for having to manage risk. I mean, literally managing two households so that you can mitigate your risks there. I mean, that's quite extraordinary. I think one of the other things that's come up from this is around training capacity development. And obviously, Matt, you mentioned that, and I think Dorcas mentioned it as well, and Ainslie as well. So I think, working very closely with communities and in terms of working in terms of that capacity development. Dorcas, I don't know if you wanted to say something around how you work with entrepreneurs, but also when you were looking at that kind of innovation and how to instigate that kind of business mindset, as you called it. How do you find people to do that with, and how do you engage with them to build that? Are you on mute again, Dorcas? Or maybe we left you.
Hello.
Hiya.
Sure. So I'll share a little bit of our work that we've done within the youth space, and as a way to promote employability as well as entrepreneurship mindset among the youth. So over a lot of our work over the past 7 years has been supporting youth groups to drive change and innovation within SMEs. And so we have a practical and experiential approach where we embed young people within SMEs. And that has been, for us, surprisingly, a way where they have learned. So working and moving from that model, kickstarting that model, I'll say piloting it for a while, we have been able to partner with organizations like the Standard Chartered Foundation, whose values is to really drive employability on the continent. And with the approach of embedding young people, now, yes, there's the classroom bit of capacity building, which you can teach, and the lecture style approach, right? And there's also the experiential bits, and so we try to tie that in, but then the experiential bit is longer. So young people go into SMEs trying to look at SMEs with a lens of a consultant and understanding what's wrong, what can be improved, the various aspects of the business and leadership, finance, and understanding that in detail, and then using their experience to help the business owner put in strategies and also implement. And I think that has been an amazing, based on my little time with challenges, and I have seen cohort upon cohort, and that experiential bit has been sincerely transforming for a lot of. So we get opportunities to bring actually green businesses on board, and we get opportunities to bring women-led businesses, in fact, businesses led by persons with disability. And so you see how young people, in each case, there's a different learning. When you're working with a woman entrepreneur, it's different. There's a different learning when you're working in a green business.
Oh, thank you, Dorcas.
That, yeah.
Oh, thank you. And we're coming towards the end of the session, so I wanted to ask each of our speakers if you had 3 words that you think are the key things that can help us push towards an innovative, green and sustainable future. What would your 3 key things be? Who wants to go first? Ainslie, can I pick on you?
So 3 things. So first thing is I think relationships are important, and so relationships under relationships, collaboration falls under that. I think those are crucial, and it helps to form that connection, that bond, trust with people. It allows you to understand, what's required. So
Okay, let's just go with one. Matt, what would your top tip be for if we were going to push towards a greener, more sustainable future?
Yeah, well, certainly it needs to be clean. That's the first thing. It needs to be the movement to that system also needs to be fair, and it also needs to focus on the citizen and their livelihoods and their health.
Oh, brilliant. Maggie, what would you say to that? What would your key words be?
So most of them Matt has taken them. But I think
Matt's stealing the limelight.
But I think I would also add, I think what Ainslie also mentioned, to say collaborative. So we need to work together if we are to be innovative, but also especially for a greener future, we need to be able to work together. I think with that, then also brings the issue of fairness, where we're not looking at not only for ourselves, but also looking out for others as well.
Great, thank you. And Dorcas? Oh, maybe she's on mute again.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yeah.
So our innovations need to be market-driven and should focus on the market to make them sustainable. We should aim to build a coordinated ecosystem that works hand in hand. And then the last one will be, let's not leave anyone behind as we aim to innovate. Let's include other people, and inclusion makes everyone win.
Well, thank you everybody very, very much for your time, for your questions, for your great presentations. I think we've got some brilliant things to take away from us here around relationships and collaborations around building a just and fair future. So thank you everyone for your participation with us today. And we shall leave it there and maybe see you at some of the sessions this afternoon or tomorrow. Thank you ever so much.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Okay.